How's it going this week, everybody? This week I'm going to be having Nathan on the show, and he came on to share his two very intense extraterrestrial encounters. It's a very interesting story, and I'm glad he came on to share it today. Also, a quick shout out to all the members that have been signing up. You really help keep things going around here. If you are interested in the membership, you can head over to challengetheunknown.com and get early access to new episodes. Thanks for listening. Why don't you tell me what happened and describe what you saw, man?
All right. So it was the day after my 21st birthday. A couple of my friends got together and they wanted to rent a cabin in the woods and throw like a big party for everybody. They were going to invite like 50 people out. And then it ended up being like it all fell through, but we still paid for it. So my girlfriend and I ended up going out there. We stayed out there for a couple days. And then my friend came out on the day before my birthday, one of them. And we're just kind of hanging out, drinking a little bit, hanging out by the fire. It was pretty close to midnight, and we were hanging out around the fire and talking about my neighbor's cat. Funny enough, but I saw a flash in the sky, like across the horizon. This was up on a hill, so there was like trees below it and an open area where the fire pit was. You could see out over the lake. So I saw a flash, and I kind of stopped talking. So I'm just like staring. I was trying to see if it was just me or like what was going on. And they're both looking at me, waiting for me to finish my sentence. And then a few seconds later, I was like, "Did you guys see that?" And they're like, "No, see what?" So I was just like, "Huh, that was weird." So went back to talking. My girlfriend at the time, she got up and she walked in that general direction. There was a driveway that wrapped up around the fire pit over to a little parking spot. She was kind of walking around. Me and my friend were talking still. And a few minutes went by, and she's like, "Come here and look at this." Like, "This is really weird." So they both got up and went over, standing there by her. I was like, "I don't see anything." She's like, "Well, look a little harder." And I was like, "Well, what are you seeing?" So she pointed down into the woods, and there's some lights just kind of like bobbing around in the woods. Not like a lot, just a little bit. Like it could have been mistaken for anything. If you weren't staring at it, like it looked like fireflies, I guess. But we're in Idaho, we don't have fireflies. So I was like, "Oh, well, that's probably just, a light down on the dock, seeing it through the trees." She's like, "No." Like, "We can't see the dock from here." So we're standing there for a while and keep watching. And this light like slowly moves from the left to the right of where we're looking. And we're just kind of staring there in the darkness. And then a couple more ended up showing up in pretty close proximity to it. So she pointed up one out, and then I started looking around, and I saw half a dozen or so like spread out all the way around the fire pit area that we were at. We're standing there and didn't hear anything. It was really quiet that night. No sound at all, no wind, no bugs or any kind of nature noise going on. So we're standing there for a while watching these things just kind of slowly move around in the woods. And I was like, "Well, I'm going to go check it out." I was like, "You guys going to come with me?" And they just didn't say anything. So I had this little flashlight glow stick thing that I bought at Walmart. It's like a combo, half glow stick, half flashlight. I had that on me. So I ran down the hill, kind of turned it on when I got like to the bottom where the brush was and whatnot, and kind of made my way up to where I saw the light. And it had disappeared at that point. So I'm just kind of standing there in the darkness. I turn off my light, try and reorient and see if I can see anything. And it kind of went up the hill, like from where I ran down. There's a little bit of a valley. There's a little stream running through there. So I'm looking up the hill, and I see this like blue head shape poke around the tree in front of me. I couldn't tell how far it was. I'd say maybe 50 feet away from me up the hill. And it kind of just like peeks around, like somebody looking around a corner all sneakily, but it was glowing like a bright blue. And it kind of like tucked back in. And then I started talking. I was like, "Hey, I was like, come out here, like show yourself, but it just kind of like did the little head tuck thing where it kept poking out from one side to the other, like looking at me. Did that for a minute or two, and I was like, well, I'm gonna go up there and investigate. So I turn on my light and I like plow up the hill really fast to where the tree was that I saw it. Get up there, looking around, didn't see anything. So then I turn off my light again, and I heard a stick snap pretty close to me, about 10 feet or so. So I turned around real quick, whipped on my light in the direction that I heard the snap, and there wasn't anything again. So there was a stump in this little kind of like circle area where I was standing. So I went over and I sat down on the stump. And I turned my light off and I lit up a cigarette, just kind of waiting to see what would happen. So I light my cigarette and I take a drag, and then I heard something again. So I whip around and look, like still nothing. So I just turn off my light again, go to take another drag of my cigarette, and it's gone, like out, it's just ash on my lap at that point. And I was like, that's really weird, because I've been sitting there like 10, 20 seconds max. But I didn't really think anything of it for whatever reason. So I lit up another cigarette, took a few drags of it. And then my girlfriend, she yelled into the woods. She's like, where are you? I was like, I'm right here. Like, I just got here. Like, wait a minute. I want to see what this is. She was like, you've been gone for a really long time. And I was like, what are you talking about? I've been down here for like 5 minutes max. She's like, no, we've been looking for you. Like, we're really worried. She's like, come back here. And I was like, okay, whatever. Like, I didn't see anything anyway. So there was kind of like a deer trail off to my right that I found. And I just kind of like followed it back up to the cabin. And they're both standing at the top waiting for me. And I get up there and they're like, seriously, you've been gone for like 3 hours. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, what time is it? And it was like 3 o'clock in the morning at that point, and all this started right around midnight. But I have no idea like what happened. Like, I didn't have any like lapse in time, or it was all like seamless, So they're like, oh, that's really weird. My friend, he had to go pee. So he's like, I'm going to go in the house. And she's like, well, I'm freaking out. She's like, I'm going to go in there too, because it's cold or whatever. I was like, okay, well, I'm going to go sit by the fire and, see if anything happens. So we all agree and go our separate ways. They go inside. I go and sit by the fire. I sat down. I was kind of just like wondering like what that was and kind of looking around to see if I could see anything else. So then I'm sitting there and I see these two lights coming up the path that I had just taken, like up to the driveway. And they're kind of walking slow, side by side, and kind of bobbing too. Like, I guess their heads were like bobbing up and down. It kind of reminded me of like a bird, like a crow walking or something. So I'm like sitting there and I yelled at them. I was like, hey, you guys come out here. But they weren't hearing me, I guess. I could see them both sitting at the table in the dining room from where I was sitting. And they just ignored me. And I was kind of like freaked out at that point. So I sat there and I saw these things walking, and then they kind of went like behind a hill from where I was sitting, so I couldn't see them anymore. So I like got up and I walked toward the house, and it would have been kind of in the same direction where they were coming. And I saw them like crest the little hill. And I was like, what the hell? So I like ran in the house. I was like, hey, you guys come out here and check this out. And they're like, no way, dude. Like, we're not doing anything. I was like, whatever. So went back and I sat back by the fire, and like the lights had disappeared at that point. I didn't hear or see anything. I'm sitting there and it's dark, quiet. Next thing I know, I hear some like footsteps. It sounded like a little kid, like trying to sneak, like maybe like a 6-year-old, how they try to sneak, but it was gravel. So there was just a light footstep on gravel every few seconds. And like, I could hear it like coming my direction. And I was like, what the fuck? Like, what is this? What's going on? So I like sat there and I contemplated if I should like hang out and try and see what it is. And then I decided that I was too freaked out. So I went in the house and I told them what happened. And we all kind of like looked out the windows and we're looking around the house, but there wasn't any outside lights in the cabin. So, I mean, we didn't really see anything. We hung out for, I'd say, another hour and a half till the sun started coming up. like just cresting the horizon. We were talking about what it could be, and my friend, he was very skeptical. He's like, it's probably just like some people out there like messing around with us because they know that we're staying here. You know, like saying maybe it was some of the people that were supposed to show up at the party and they just didn't. You know, they just decided to come mess with us. So eventually, when the sun comes up, we go outside and we started looking around again, you know, see if we could see anything like in the daylight. And I think the lights were still there, but not, like further off in the distance, like they had walked away. So we just kind of built the fire back up and hung out. And I was standing on the edge of the driveway, kind of like looking out in the woods. And I saw a light come over the trees. It was like a bright white circular light, but it was divided into 4 sections, like a pizza, I guess, kind of. You know, you can clearly see the sections of it. And it just went really slowly, like from the direction that I had initially seen the flash, like in the opposite direction over us. And they both saw it. Like I yelled at them and I was like, look at that, you know. So we sat there and watched it for probably a good 30, 45 seconds as it just went slowly across. And then it just went off into the horizon. So I don't know. It was pretty weird. We ended up going out and looking later in the woods to see if we could find some footprints or anything. And my friend had to leave maybe 20 minutes after we saw the light. So my girlfriend and I, we went out and looked around, saw a bunch of like weird things. Like there's kind of like this triangular footprint like burnt into a rock. And then there was like a similar one like on a log, like a rotten log, like it was smashed in, like something heavy had stepped on it. And it was pretty muddy. So we were looking around and there was a lot of, you know, animal tracks and moose, elk, deer, you know, whatever. And at the time we were looking in the mud, like I didn't really see anything. But after looking at the imprint in the log and the mark on the rock, like I found similar footprints in the mud. And it was kind of weird because it had like 2 like holes on the front and then like a spot for a heel. And the holes in the front area went like 4 to 6 inches deep, you know. I got pretty big hands and I stuck my middle finger down there and like it was deeper than that. So I like grabbed a stick and I was kind of measuring it. And, like we took a bunch of pictures of all this stuff and I ended up losing the cell phone that I had and I had transferred them to my sister's laptop and then she got that stolen. It was like shortly thereafter. So there's unfortunately no evidence. I did do like a drawing of the footprint and the drawing of like what I saw in the woods. And I ended up contacting MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network. Talked to a guy, Charles Stansberg, about it. He asked me like what happened, what I see, when did it happen, which direction did it go. And we kind of had like a little back and forth for a little while. And then I guess he just got disinterested in my case. So he just kind of just stopped talking to me at some point. And then, yeah, I mean, not really much else happened after that. I posted on Reddit about a year ago, I think, or maybe not even that, but had a bunch of people contact me about it, and they're like, "Why haven't you, talked about this before?" And I did back in the day. I think I posted on like Above Top Secret, and then like Disclosed.tv or something. Just kind of like looking for answers, see if anybody else had seen anything, because I've done a lot of searching on the internet and never found anything that even remotely resembled that. So it's pretty weird. I did have one experience before that. Got time to listen?
Yeah, man. Let's first recap this first story, then we'll get to that second one for sure, man. That's very interesting. As for the MUFON stuff, whenever you're dealing with these kind of big organizations, whether it's the Sasquatch or UFOs and stuff, they kind of have this general idea of what these things are, if that makes sense. So
right.
If there's anything that kind of strays from the norms that they, have for themselves, they won't listen to it. For example, with Sasquatch, a lot of people that I've talked to, and if you listen to Sasquatch Chronicles, at first he was like, if anybody mentions the lights, I don't listen to them. But then over the years, so many people were having credible sightings and also saying, hey, I also see lights in the forest around the times that these Sasquatch encounters happen. then it's like, okay, well, maybe there's something to the lights. Maybe that's not just, made up. So I think it's probably the same way with the UFO stuff. It's probably MUFON is like, hey, if we hear anything out of the ordinary, we're probably just going to push it off to the side and not, obviously this is just me speculating. I've never talked to anybody over there and never really dealt with them. But maybe that's what it was, because it sounds like you were talking to him about it and he just got disinterested. So who knows? Maybe that's what happened, or I don't know, man. I think it's really weird. The glowing is very interesting of whatever creature you saw, and we'll get into more detail about that at the end of the show. So why don't you go ahead and tell the next story that you got?
Okay. So this was about 2.5 years prior to that. I was living in California at the time, and I had a friend. She wanted to go camping down on like the 299, just a little bit north of Redding. So we packed up our things. We were living in Eureka at that point, so it's a couple-hour drive. Got our things together, went down. There's a campground called the Bigfoot Campground, like right off 299, and we decided that we were going to stay there. And it was like August, I think, so pretty hot day. Ended up hanging out in the water all day and, just kind of messing around. We ended up getting in a fight like later that night. And she was like, oh, whatever, I'm going to bed. So we went to bed. She was all pissed, whatever. Prior to that, like right about the time we were going to bed, a bunch of these like college kids rolled up, and they were being really rowdy and loud. And it was just after dark at that point. And one of them had this, like, one of those giant spotlights, like the million candle lights or whatever. And they're over there, like, messing around. And I was like, great, they're going to be keeping me up all night or whatever. But, surprisingly, they're pretty quiet. I fell asleep relatively quickly, and, that was that. So later in the night, I'd say 2, 3 o'clock, I wake up just randomly, and I'm sitting there staring at the top of my tent. And I see a light like flash on the top of the tent. I was like, oh, great. One of these kids are just up, trying to go pee or whatever. Got that massive spotlight out. But so I'm sitting there, and it's like, it was pulsing, like kind of seemed like maybe somebody was moving it over the tent and then back. And I was like, that's really weird. So I'm laying there, and it just like keeps going, like every 3 seconds or so, it light up for a second or two and then like go off. And I did this maybe 20 or 30 times until I was like, all right, I got to go like check this out. So I tried to wake up the girl that was with me, and she just wasn't moving at all. Like I was shaking her pretty hard, just nothing. So I was like, whatever, I'm going to go check it out. So I unzip the tent, stick my head out, and like look over in that direction. And the light flashes again, but it's lighting up everything that I can see, like all the trees up above like my tent all the way to the top, and I started looking around, and it was like the entire area. So right where our tent was, we were probably about 40 feet away from their like outhouse area, and like that goes up a hill. So the outhouse is halfway up the hill, and I could see that the light was coming from the other side of the hill. So I get out of my tent, and I walk over and walk up this hill, and like still seeing the flashing coming from that direction the entire time. And I mean, it was like bright, like brighter than daylight, bright, lighting up everything. And I mean, I don't know. I was surprised that I was the only one up and investigating. So anyway, so I get up to the top of this hill, and it kind of goes down into like a really big valley. Say it was like half a mile wide or something. Like, I guess it kind of looked like a crater, and trees all around. At the very bottom of this little like crater area, there was a disc. I'd say maybe like 50, 60 feet in diameter, just hovering above the ground, completely silent. And like that was where the light was coming from. But the light was lighting up everything that I could see from that point for at least a mile, I'd say, just like pulsing super bright. And I was like, what's going on? So I started down the hill to go toward it, and something told me not to. Like it was a really strong intuition, like, don't do that. Like, you should go back to your tent. So, I followed my gut because I like to do that. It's gotten me out of some sticky situations. So I go back and get in the tent, zip it up, and like tried to wake the girl up again. She just wasn't moving. So I was like, whatever. So I laid down, got my sleeping bag and like zipped it up. And as soon as I put my head down on my pillow, I heard a bunch of cars like ripping by. And mind you, this is a windy road. Like the maximum speed limit on that road was like 30, but it sounded like they were doing like 75. Like probably a dozen vehicles. Sounded like trucks just ripping by this campground on the road. And I was like, what the, like maybe there's an emergency or something. Like it was definitely dire, whatever was happening. So after about the sixth vehicle, the light stopped flashing, and like I heard them all go by, and then it was just quiet again. And then I ended up, going back to sleep after that. Woke up the next day. She was still pissed at me. I tried to tell her what happened, but she just didn't even want to talk to me. We ended up packing up our stuff and heading home, but that was that.
That's an intense one, man. It's pretty rare that people get that close to, a saucer-shaped craft. I talked to a gentleman a while ago. I think that episode, I don't remember the number. It was Flying Saucers and Foster Kids. And it's this guy that was living in a foster home when he was, younger. And he had an encounter with some disc-shaped object, and it had hovered over the house so low that he felt like he could have picked up a rock and thrown it and hit it on the side of it. But these stories are rare, man. Whenever you hear somebody talking about being able to see the actual saucer, that's pretty rare, man. That's a pretty cool encounter, and I kind of want to go back to the whole fits the norms kind of thing. I'm of the mindset, like, tell the whole story, man. Like, just because it doesn't fit your idea of what this stuff is, doesn't mean that story shouldn't be out there. It's an interesting topic, and the reality of it is we don't know what these things are, and we don't know where they come from for sure, and so who knows what they are, and who knows what kind of things you're going to see when encountering these things. So let's go back to the entity that you saw in the forest during your encounter. You said it was glowing like an aura or like a color around the head.
Yeah, it was like an electric blue. It kind of just like outlined the head and then the eyes. I mean, it's dumb as it sounds. It kind of looked like a classic like alien head. But it also had this like a weird orange marking on its forehead. Like I don't know what to compare it to. It was just like a few different lines, like kind of squiggly lines and then like straight lines.
Interesting.
Like I drew it out. I don't remember where the drawing is, but yeah, super weird. Like the eyes were like a solid electric blue, and then the outline around the head, just was kind of like a neon.
Interesting. Yeah, man, I've heard a lot about, the classic grays. I haven't really heard about, maybe I have. That weirdly sounds familiar. Not the electric blue, but I've heard about like the glowing aura kind of thing before. I also talked to a woman recently who had an encounter with some kind of similar entity, and she said after the encounter her skin was glowing for a period of a few seconds. Like her whole skin was glowing, and it kind of just faded away. She described it as almost like a film over her skin, like some kind of residue was on her skin, but she couldn't feel it. And it basically made everything glow, all these different colors, and it kind of just faded away. So it was really interesting. So that's why I always say, tell the whole story, man, because you're gonna find some similarities between all these different accounts. So what do you think these things are, man?
I don't know, honestly. My aunt's always been really into extraterrestrials, and she has a bunch of stories of her own. So I'm predisposed to lean in that direction, but I've never gotten close enough to actually find out. I'm hoping that I'll get the chance. Like they say, things come in threes. I've had 2 like major experiences, and I figure if I have another one, I'm not going to back down regardless of what happens.
Well, yeah, like the saucer encounter is pretty intense, man. You don't see that, and the lighting up of the forest is really interesting too. So how far away were you from that craft, would you say?
Maybe 150, 200 feet.
And it was a big thing. So you were, yeah,
massive. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, man. Well, I think your story was awesome, man, and I'm glad you came on to share it. I'm sure someone will write me after this airs and say, oh, I've seen something similar. They might not come on the show, but that's generally what happens is I'll have a story like this that's something I really haven't covered before, and someone will end up writing me and saying, oh, I had an experience similar. So it's going to be exciting to see what happens after this airs.
Yeah, if so, let me know. Like, I'm really interested to find somebody that's had a similar experience, discuss it with them.
Yeah, 100%, man. All right, man, we are out of time, so thanks for coming on, and we will be in touch.